Thank you. Undercover work is very, very hard. It's very difficult. Takes a toll on you. When I first started working undercover, I was 6'4", blonde, and good looking. Kind of beat you up. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the Burlington Library and Marnie for inviting me, and Dick Haley stopping by to sell my books. You will see over the course of the next hour that I'm not a professional speaker. Okay, but I speak from the heart, and you're going to hear this journey of mine through the FBI for the last 30 years. Okay, and what's interesting is this book, which is obviously the first book I ever wrote, was never meant for the general public. Okay, I wrote it for 4 people. I wrote it for my wife and my 3 children. It was never to see the light of day. That's a whole different story. The reason I wrote it for my wife and my 3 children, I wrote it to my wife to thank her for basically raising our family while I was out doing all this crazy stuff. Okay, I was never home. She didn't know where I was, what I was doing, when I would be home. And at the time when I was young, I thought, I figured I was going to solve every crime in every city in every world. Okay, and we had 3 small children. And my wife stayed home initially and took care of the kids in the house while I did this. And it was just, we didn't think of it as anything special. It was, I worked, she took care of the kids. But as I got older and she reminded me I was missing some of their childhood and growing up, I tended to become a better father at that point. So I thanked my wife, but I also wanted my children. I have 3 children. They're all very productive citizens now. I wanted my children also to understand what I did while they were little, because they would see things that just most kids didn't see. And I tell the story all the time. Dick Haley's going to hear these stories over and over again tonight. But when my middle son was 7 or 8 years old, he was sick one day and he stayed home from school. And I had worked the night before. I didn't get home until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, went to bed. I didn't know he was home sick. So I'm sleeping, my son's in his room asleep, 7 or 8 years old, and he tells this story when he's like 25 or 26 years old at a Christmas event. But he's talking about when he was 7, 8 years old. He said the doorbell rang, and Dad got up to answer the door. And as I went downstairs to answer the door, he went to the top of the stairway and he was watching me, but I didn't know he was there. And the doorbell rang, and my son looked down, and I answered the door with a gun behind my leg. Okay? Because when I had looked out the window when the doorbell rang, I saw a car that looked like a car of somebody that I was investigating at the time, and I thought they maybe showed up and they were coming to my house. So I'm at the front door with a gun behind my leg, and imagine the surprise of the UPS driver when I take the package. All right? But again, my son saw that and never said a word to me or my wife. Okay? And I tell people my older son, my kids were taught at an early age, if they had to wake Dad up, they had to wake me up with a broomstick. Serious, they had to recommend a broomstick, because my oldest boy woke me up one night and shook me, and I reached out of a dead sleep and I grabbed him on the throat. Okay? And think about it. What would a young kid think when his dad comes out of a dead sleep and grabs him by the neck? All right? That's an odd way to grow up. So I wanted them to understand why I wasn't home sometimes or a lot of times, and why I missed birthdays, I missed games. You can't recapture that as a parent. Okay, so after 30 years and after I finally got some common sense, I wanted my children to understand what I did for a living. So that's how this book came about. None of you were ever supposed to see it, or if you ever will see it. Sylvester Stallone wasn't supposed to see it. There's this whole craziness now. And I joke about this movie, TV stuff, because I retired in 2017. And I get more questions, attention about what's happened in the last year and a half than I did for the last 30 years. Okay, but what I tell people is this is all that matters. Okay, this was the highlight of my life. This was important, this was meaningful. So this other stuff, which is fine, it's just, you know, it's just silly. All right? So I want to walk you I want to walk you through my story, my FBI story, because it's actually some people have said it's interesting, other people have said it's bizarre. Okay, and bizarre is not a word you usually hear with an FBI agent's career. And anybody here an FBI agent or know an FBI agent? Ma'am?
My brother.
Who's your brother?
He's out in California, LA.
FBI agent?
He's retired.
Okay. I guarantee you by the end of this presentation, thank you. I guarantee you by the end of this presentation, you're going to wonder why the FBI ever hired me, and that I'm probably not a typical FBI agent, okay? And you'll see, because of my upbringing and some things that happened in my career, why I am the way I am. All right, so I want to take a little time and just walk you through my career, and all these stories are in the book. Two things I want to tell you. One is I never did anything by myself. Any FBI agent tells you he did anything wonderful by himself is full of something. Okay? We work as a team. Okay? Everything I did, I was supported by a team. Okay? So when people put your name in the paper or you get on TV and this and that, it's not because of one person. All right? So think of it as an athletic event. Nobody ever won a game by themselves. It's the same thing in the FBI. Okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is, you're going to hear I had thousands and thousands of good days in the FBI. Okay? I love the FBI. I'd work there for the rest of my life if I could. They throw you out when you hit 57. It's mandatory retirement. So I love the FBI, but you're going to hear some things during this presentation where I had some really bad days in the FBI. All right, and by the end of this presentation, I think you'll understand why I am the way I am. All right, so why do I say something like that? Okay, because of, well, let me walk you. I'm going to walk you through the book as it chronological order. So because it was meant for my family, I spent some time on my childhood, so my children understood my childhood. All right, my dad was a cop. His dad was a cop, and guess what my son does for a living? Okay, so that's 4 generations of police officers. We were blue bloods before there were blue bloods. Okay, so I grew up in a police environment. My dad was a cop. All his friends were cops. I thought it was normal that everybody just walked around with guns on. Okay, when I was 7 or 8, just like my son was 7 or 8, when I was 7 or 8, my dad used to walk a beat, and I would go with him. My mother worked in a trucking firm at midnight. She was a secretary. So sometimes my dad would take me to work, and he would walk me on his beat, and he would put me in a bar room by myself with bookies, with pool players. And because I was the son of the beat cop, everybody treated me like gold. The bartender would give me a martini glass with Coca-Cola in it and ice cubes, and I thought it was perfectly normal. And there's people next to me taking bets. There's all kinds of shenanigans going on in these places, but you know, it was just normal for us. So, and again, I'm 7 or 8 years old. That's the way we're being raised. I grew up in a very blue-collar environment. There was no money. I never intended to go to college. Okay, there was never any money to go to college. You cannot be an FBI agent unless you have a college degree. All right. So in 1970, well, I guess you could figure it out. In 75, when I graduated from high school, I had planned to go into the military and join the Marine Corps. All right, that was my plan. And 2 weeks before I was due to enter the Marine Corps, my dad pulled up in a patrol car. I was working in a playground. My dad pulled up in a police car. And 1, I thought I was in trouble. And 2, he got out of the police car and he had an envelope in his hand. And I tell people later, and it's in the book, 2 envelopes changed my life. And this was the first envelope, okay? My dad gave me an envelope. It was from a college in Florida. I grew up in Massachusetts. It was from a college in Florida where I did not apply. I had never heard of the school. and there was a baseball scholarship offer. Okay? So within 2 weeks, I was on a plane to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, to play baseball. All right? You're nodding your head, you know it's a good baseball school. Okay? I was a very, very good baseball player in Massachusetts. Then I went to Florida and saw how real baseball players play.
Southern boys.
All right.
In
Yep.
the warm weather.
They're very good. My point being is lightning struck me. Okay, I was able to get out of a blue-collar mill town and go down to Florida and play baseball and go to class once in a while. All right? But again, I joke about it. I was pretty good up here. I was not very good down there. It got me through 4 years of college and got me an education and a degree, okay? But again, I had never thought of joining the FBI. Back up for 1 second, the high school thing about sitting in bar rooms and this and that. When I was in the 8th grade, the police showed up at one of our baseball games and arrested our first baseman for armed robbery during the game. Armed robbery, 8th grade, okay? We just switched positions like this happened every day. Okay, it wasn't that unusual that things like that happen. I tell the same story. We had a friend who didn't want to take exams at high school time, so he would call in bomb threats to the high school, but he would call from his home phone. Okay, so to this day he's known as Boom Boom. Okay? But again, these were the types of characters I grew up around. So now I go to Florida in the sunshine, playing baseball, but I still was I didn't even think about doing anything other than becoming a cop. It's just like the family job. So I got out of college, and a year after I'm out of college, I'm a police officer arresting people for the same things I did a year earlier. All right? So nothing bad, but just things that get you in trouble. All right? But again, police work taught me how to deal with people. Okay, because when you're a police officer, you would deal with every segment of society. You deal with the president of a bank, you deal with a homeless addict, you deal with domestic violence, you deal with violent people. It's a crazy but fascinating job. So I was a police officer for about 5 years, and we had a series of bank robberies where I was working, and at that time the FBI would show up at bank robberies with the local police. And after 3 or 4 times, one of the FBI agents said to me one day, he said, "You ever think about applying to the FBI?" I said, "No." He says, "Well, I think you should think about it." I said, "Okay." All right, went home, didn't even think about it. 2 or 3 days later, we were at another bank job, and he says to me, now this isn't the second envelope, but he hands me an envelope and he says, "Take a look at this and tell me what you think." And I pulled it out, and it's the qualifications for an FBI agent. I thought you had to be like an accountant and a lawyer and have advanced degrees, but as long as you had a college degree, you could at least apply. And I had the college degree, luckily, because of playing baseball. So he was smart, though. He put in the qualifications, but behind it, he put another sheet of paper in there that had the salary. And the salary was more than double that I was making as a cop at the time. And we had one baby, and we had a second baby on the way, and my wife didn't work. All right? So I said, what the hell, I'll give it a shot. I never even envisioned getting contacted. But back in those days, you'd get a piece of paper, show up at this place and take a written test, show up at this place and take a physical test. I kept going, expecting just to get that letter saying, thanks, but stop coming. All right? And then after about 6 months to a year, and I loved being a cop. It was the greatest job in the world. But about 6 months later, I get that second envelope that changes my life. Open it up on a Friday, it says, "You are hereby appointed a special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Okay? Never saw it coming, so of course I call up the FBI and I say, "Hey, I got this letter. It says I got hired. It also says I have to be there 2 days from now." I got the letter on a Friday and I was to report on Sunday. Okay, and I said, I haven't given notice. I got to get my family taken care of. I can't show up on Sunday. I said, "What happens if I don't show up?" You go to the bottom of the list. All right? So in 20-degree weather with a little baby and a baby in her belly, my wife stood there while I got on a plane to go to Washington, D.C., and she stayed home to take care of the family. All right, 2 days later, I'm gone for, I think it was a 16-week course. Okay, back in those days, you didn't have cell phones and all that. You know, we were allowed one phone call I think it was every 4 weeks. Okay, so imagine, she's pregnant, 2-year-old, and I'm down there running around like a maniac. So that's, again, why did I write the book? To thank my wife for letting me go to Quantico 2 days after I got the letter. All right? I go to Quantico, but because of my police career, I was very comfortable in that environment. I had been through police academies, blah, blah, blah. So Quantico really wasn't that big of a deal, but I made, you know, good friends. The very first night you go to Quantico, everybody has to get dressed up, you know. Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. suit, white shirts, starched. And they made you get up and say, why did you join the FBI? And everybody stood up, and one guy said, you know, I wanted to join the greatest law enforcement agency in the world. Another guy got up and said, I wanted to make a difference in society. And a bunch of these people had very high-level jobs and stepped down from them to take an FBI job. And they finally made their way around to me, and I stood up and I said very simply, I need the money. Okay? And the people, the bureaucrats at Quantico, I thought they were going to like, that did not go over well with them. But there were two, they're called class counselors, there were 2 field agents, real FBI agents who work in the field, who take a class through. And those 2 guys came up to me later and said, you know, you're gonna do fine. You're as honest as the day is long. And they were laughing like they got one of them snuck through. We got one of them. But again, got through Quantico. I get assigned to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and all I wanted to do was stay on the East Coast. I had only lived on the East Coast. We had guys sent to Alaska. We had guys sent to, you know, Montgomery, Alabama. I was lucky I went to Philadelphia because Philadelphia at the time was called the top 12, which means it's one of the 12 largest offices in the FBI. And if you go to a top 12, you're going to be busy. You're going to do good work. So I was lucky, and immediately I got assigned to a Colombian drug squad. Okay, today that's politically incorrect to call it that, because all we did was go after Colombians. But in 1980s, every drop of cocaine entered this country came from Colombia. So we were targeting Colombian drug traffickers, and I'm now running around all over the world chasing drug traffickers, where a year before I'm writing parking tickets and, you know, legal lane changes. So it was a big shift, but I loved it from day one. Loved it from day one, and that's when I started working those 12, 14, 16-hour days. And back in those days, you couldn't go home unless you had a couple of cocktails with the boys after. So it's 18, 20 hours out of the house, okay? And at this time, my kids are like 6, 3, and 1, okay? And Dad's gone, all right? I get to Philadelphia in 1987, okay? Fast forward 5 years. Even with 5 years in the FBI, you're basically like a puppy. You're brand new, you don't open your mouth, you do what you're told, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's not like that anymore, but when I came in, that's what it was like, all right? So fast forward to October 15th, 1992. For 5 years I've been an agent, okay? That night of October 15th, 1992, myself and 2 other agents, we seized, after a 2-year investigation, we seized 50 kilograms of heroin at the Philadelphia airport, okay? I hope nobody in here knows the value of heroin, but 50 kilos of heroin is about $180 million worth of heroin, okay? It was one of the top 10 seizures ever in the world, okay? And we got that, and we paid 0 for it. We convinced the bad guys to front it or give it to us in advance, and we would sell it and give it back to them, and they're still waiting to get paid, all right? So in 5 years, I become what's known in the FBI as a golden boy, okay? And a golden boy is one who can do no wrong, okay? You get all these high-level officials, up until the director of the FBI, giving you awards and doing press conferences and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, this is easy now. I just got to do 15 more years, and it's all downhill now. I already made my career case. So I'm on Sky, you know, high on, whatever that's, Sky 9 or whatever you call it. Cloud 9. See? That's why I'm not a professional speaker. I'm on Cloud 9. Everything is like perfect in my life. My family, I got 3 healthy kids. I got a wonderful wife. I just hit a home run at work. Nothing can go wrong. Right. Fast forward a year and a half. April 1994. We finally get the bad guys were over in Pakistan. We have to extradite them, which takes about a year or so. We have to extradite them to the United States to face charges. So we finally get them here, and I start getting ready to go to trial. Okay, you have to go to court and prove these people guilty of the crimes. So I start going to court, and one duty you have is to check your evidence and make sure it's ready to be prepared for trial. So I go up into the evidence room at Philadelphia FBI, and it's huge. It's like probably 3 of these rooms. And I walk in. This is April of '94, a year and a half after we seized it. I walk in and I see a gentleman in a white lab coat. Okay? FBI agents do not wear white lab coats. So right away I'm like, this is strange, but it's got nothing to do with me. And then I saw 2 employees walk up to him and whisper to him. Okay? Whisper to him as I'm standing in the room. Now, you've always heard the expression, hairs on the back of your neck. When you're a cop, you develop these instincts where you know that trouble's coming before it actually arrives. Okay, and when I saw those 2 employees whisper to that lab coat, I knew something was wrong. Okay, I just could tell. And then I looked at the box. He was handling a box. At first I didn't look at it, and then I looked at it, and the box he was handling had my file number on it, the heroin file. And in those days, I used to swear a lot, and I was very abrupt. And so I challenged the gentleman what he was doing in my evidence. And all he said to me was, he said, go see your SAC. SAC is your special agent in charge. He's the #1 guy in the office. He's the big boss. 5-year agents do not go see the SAC. We don't even talk to him. Okay? So as soon as he said that, I knew there was a problem. Okay? But I'm like, you know, we'll figure this out. It can't be that big of a deal. I go to see my SAC, who was a good guy, and he appreciated that I worked hard. And I said to him, hey, boss, this guy sent me down to see you, and I don't know what this jerk's doing up in my evidence, messing around. I said, I have an important trial coming up. And this guy who I respected and liked, and who I thought liked me, looked at me. I used the expression in the book. He looked at me like a medieval executioner. And he said, Mike, the trial is the least of your worries. Okay? And as soon as he said that, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but your body can go into shock, and that's what my body did. Like, I literally couldn't hear. He would speak, and I would see his lips. After he told me that, I could see his lips moving, but I couldn't hear anything. Okay? And I felt like the room was like crushing me. The room was shrinking. And he said to me, there's an internal investigation. You cannot discuss this with anyone, including your wife. Okay? That was important because when I was a cop, my first year on the job, I came from a police family. I know what it's like to be a cop. My wife did not have any law enforcement in her family. Okay? I was a year on the job in the police force, and I was working midnights in uniform. I got sent into a bar, and I got jumped. Okay? They broke my nose, 2 black eyes, and a separated shoulder. So I go home from the hospital with my arm in a sling, 2 black eyes, and a broken nose, and I walk in, and my wife starts screaming at me, screaming. And I'm like, I just got my ass kicked, and now I'm getting screamed at for getting my ass kicked. I don't understand this. All right? But the reality of police work hit her. This is what can happen when you go to work. So we made a deal that night. We've been married now 35 years. Okay? We made a deal that night that what I did at work stayed at work. We didn't talk about it at home. So fast forward to this event. My boss tells me you can't talk to your wife, so I don't. At that time, I did what the FBI told me all the time. I didn't do that after this, but I would do what I was told. Okay? So I went home, and I didn't tell my wife, but she could tell something was wrong. All right? And what do? You go home, hi, honey, like, Remember that case I worked 2 years around the clock? Well, they think I stole $180 million worth of heroin. Okay? So that started an investigation that lasted about 4 months. Okay? Every day I would walk in the office, I had to go to work, and I was treated like I was a bad guy. People would walk, you know, when people stop talking when you come in the room or turn the other way when you walk by. It was awful. And I kept telling myself, I know I didn't steal it, so, you know, nothing can happen, but that's not the way I was feeling. All right? I knew I had to be interviewed. I was the case agent that seized the drugs, so obviously I was going to be interviewed, but I couldn't believe that they took the extra step to say, you know, we think you stole this. You're a dope dealer. All right? Growing up in a police family, becoming a cop, becoming an FBI agent, and now you're being treated like a dope dealer. All right? Kind of plays tricks with you. All right? I kept waiting to be interviewed. I wanted my chance to tell my side of the story. A lot of people said, why didn't you get a lawyer? I didn't get a lawyer for 2 reasons. One, I couldn't afford it. And 2, I didn't do anything wrong. Okay? So I'd go home, I'd tell people that our lawn where we lived was about as big as this place right here, and I would mow it like 5 times a night. Just keep mowing the lawn all night long until it got dark, all right? And at the time I was athletic and I lifted weights and I ran a lot. I would like exercise to the point of exhaustion because I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. This stuff, again, I don't know if any of you here have ever been falsely accused of a crime. There is nothing worse. Okay, and I tell people later, and this applies even before this happened, I never locked anybody up. I've locked up thousands of people. I never locked anybody up who didn't deserve to be locked up with the evidence. There was nobody ever falsely arrested because I know what it feels like. Okay? I'm waiting to be interviewed. They finally call me. My big boss calls me. He says, come in here. It was about 9 o'clock at night. He called. He said, come in here. We need to interview you. Come in. I said, okay, I'll see you in the morning. He said, no, right now. All right? So I looked out in the yard. My kids were still, it was summertime. I looked out. My kids were still playing. I went up, took a shower, went downstairs. And not that I did this every time, but I made sure to go over to each of my kids and kiss them goodbye because I thought I might get arrested. Okay? And if you've ever thought about getting arrested when you didn't do anything wrong, it's kind of an odd feeling. All right? So I went out and kissed my kids. They all looked at me like I was crazy. And I turned around. My wife was in the screen door. Now, I hadn't said one word to her in all this time. And I looked, and she has tears coming down her eyes. And she knew and I knew that whatever just was about to happen was going to change our life. So I got in the car and I started driving like a madman. I was driving literally like 120 miles an hour on 295 in New Jersey. And I had to stop the car. I had to slow down and stop the car because I said, if you crash and kill yourself, your kids are going to think you were guilty of this. All right, so I literally pulled over the side of the road, collected my thoughts, and drove in at about 10 miles an hour. Okay, so I get there. My big boss, who now's, you know, he's got a stern face. He's not joking around. He says, go into room 123. I go in there, and there's 2 investigators there, okay? And they say to me, I'm sorry, I walk in, and there's 2 investigators there. I know who they are. I don't work with them, but I know they're agents from our office. And they start reading me my Miranda warnings, okay? Obviously, you know what Miranda warnings are. You want to talk about a surreal feeling? I've read Miranda warnings to hundreds and thousands of bad guys, and now they're being read to me. And of course, being a wise ass, I said, well, you know, I kind of know what they say. And I started screaming at these guys, top of my lungs. And I used every curse word that I know and some that I just made up on the spot. But I let them know that I had like 4 weeks or 6 weeks of just anger and everything bottled up, and it just came flying out. For about 15 minutes, I just screamed at these guys. And one of them stopped and he said, you done? Yeah. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, let's figure this out. And I kind of got a thought right there that, hey, maybe this is going to work out because it's not that hard of a crime to solve. Somebody in the FBI did it. You can't walk in off the street and get into the FBI evidence vault by yourself. All right? So I thought these guys would maybe make it happen. Went home that night. I slept for the first time in months. was able to sleep through the night. Okay, next day I get up, go back in. They're now in brand new suits, you know, changed and showered and shaved and new suits, and I look like a dog. Okay, I'm exhausted. Having trouble thinking my way through this process. So they started asking me questions. Okay, from that day until the end of the investigation, I was interviewed as a criminal suspect 29 times. Okay, 29 times I had my Miranda warnings read to me and had to answer their questions. 2 or 3 days after that, when I started to think maybe they'd solve it, I was sitting there and they said, at one point they said, stand up, okay? And I don't know if you know this, but if an FBI agent ever tells you to stand up, he's about to put handcuffs on you, okay? It's the worst feeling in the world. When they said stand up, I thought they were going to put their handcuffs on me. All right? I stood up, and they said, follow us, and they walked out of the room. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not being arrested. I followed them, and it took me a minute, but I realized they were taking me to our mug room, where you fingerprint and photograph bad guys, where I had done that to hundreds and hundreds of people in Philadelphia, and they started taking my fingerprints and my photograph with the doors open. So everybody I work with is walking by. You know, miraculously, everyone had to go to the bathroom at the same time. Because the word, you know, the FBI is the biggest rumor mill in America, and everybody's like they're about to lock McGowan up, all right? It was the most humiliating. That was probably the worst part because that's a prelude to getting arrested, okay? You're not really supposed to do that until after you arrest somebody. So I was like, well, I guess they're going to do it backwards and arrest me after they do this, all right? But I went home that night, and they kept investigating, and then about a month later, and it sounds a month, 30 days, try being falsely accused for a crime for 30 days, okay? Your mind kind of does tricks on you. I ended up talking to myself out loud in the office. You didn't do this, don't worry. And people would see me talking to myself, oh great, now he's, not only is he a thief, he's nuts, right? About a month later, they handed me a sheet of paper one day and they said, look at this. I said, what am I looking for? They said, look at it. I said, okay. It was an evidence sign-in sheet. And I started at the top. There's usually about 100 entries. I started at the top and I got about halfway down and my heart stopped. And I saw one line on it and I knew exactly who stole the heroin. And I told them. I said, so-and-so is your bad guy. Why? Because it was my file number in his handwriting, and I knew his handwriting because he sat 2 seats in front of me. Okay? And I also, everybody tells me I'm anal retentive. When you're an FBI agent, you take notes of everything you do every day. And I said, let me go get my government book, is where you keep your notes. I went back to my government book. I brought it back to that room. That I showed them the date that I identified, and my government book put me in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, 90 miles away from the city with 100 other FBI agents at SWAT training. It was physically impossible for me to be in the office that day. Okay, I think they knew about him before I identified it. I don't know that for a fact, but I knew that day who did it. Okay, and I tell people now, well, back up. They arrest him. He confesses to the crime. He confesses that he did it by himself. He sold some of the heroin on the street, and when he realized the FBI was closing in, he hid the remaining heroin and the remaining drug funds in his grandmother's washing machine. And his poor grandmother didn't even know when they came with a search warrant that he had done this. I tell people I was in the FBI for 30 plus years. There's 2 cases I won't name the bad guys. I won't even give them the courtesy of naming them. This is one, and the other one's the Boston bombing. Okay? On TV, when you saw the bombing, it was black hat and white hat. That's all the way I'll ever refer to these. So he's in with the Boston bombing marathon bad guys as far as I'm concerned. He ruined my life, okay? Because what happened was my reputation was destroyed. You don't make a lot of money as an FBI agent. You live on your integrity and your reputation. And he destroyed mine intentionally. To this day, I don't know why. The other thing that a lot of people didn't realize was not only did he steal all my heroin, he went to a different section in the evidence vault and stole 11 kilograms of cocaine from a different case I had worked, and the only name in common with both cases was mine. So he intentionally had the investigators focused on me, all right? I tell that story just to tell the rest of the story. I don't want you to think that that's, you know, I could have rolled over and curled up in a ball at that point. I told you my dad was a tough Irish cop. He had an expression, it's chapter 2 in the book. He had an expression when you were little, rub some dirt on it. You come home with your eye out of your socket or a broken leg, rub some dirt in it, okay? You lose a game, rub some dirt, you know, life's tough. So basically, I had two choices at that point. I couldn't quit. Everybody asked me why you didn't quit the FBI. I told you I had 3 little babies and a wife to support. I couldn't, okay? I had to support my family. And then the other thing was I wasn't going to quit because I didn't do anything wrong, okay? And to top it off, I wanted to say back to the FBI, you know, seriously, I'm sure you can feel the same way. I'd given my life, not given my life, but I dedicated my whole professional career to the FBI, doing things the right way, making good cases, and they turn on you in a split second, okay? And for them to think that I could literally steal drugs, other than killing somebody, selling drugs to me is the most egregious crime you can do. I've seen the devastation that drugs cause with people, good people. Everybody thinks every drug addict or drug person is a bad person. That's not true. It happens to the best families you can imagine, okay? It is a disease, all right? My job was not, I was not a social worker, I was law enforcement. My job was to lock these people up. But I have sympathy for them, I've been there. I've been in houses where you see generational, you've seen a child, his father, and their father, 3 generations addicted to drugs, okay? So, but that's what they thought I was capable of doing. That leads into my undercover career, because basically what I said at that point, that was now 7 years into my career. I said basically, I'm going to prove to you time and time again, you were wrong. So I started working undercover. Why did I work undercover? Because you can do it by yourself, all right? You don't sit behind a desk, you're out there doing this stuff. So I said, this is what I'll do. We took that case where they steal the heroin. We got the pack. I told you it was a Pakistan guy that we arrested. I brought him out of jail, and we floated the story that his heroin was stolen, which was true. As a result, he was going to be released from prison. But what the bad guys didn't know, he was released into the FBI custody, and he began to work for us. And we floated the story. He was free because his evidence was stolen, and the other bad guys believed it. Fast forward to 1996, 2 years later, we seized another 50 kilograms of heroin using the first guy that we had arrested. The point there, that was 200 million, inflation kicked it up, so the first one was 180 million, this was over 200. My point being is we took the worst possible situation and made another case out of it, all right? And that was an undercover case, and that's when I started doing this stuff. So quickly, I'm gonna take you through my undercover career and what most of the book is. And 2 things I'll tell you right now. The FBI and my publisher do not want me jarring about the heroin theft. That's kind of something they don't want out there. You noticed on the cover of my book, it doesn't say stolen heroin case, all right? That's too bad, that's what happened, okay? That's the truth. Some people don't like the truth or can't handle the truth. You can look up, anything I tell you tonight, you can look up in public records and verify it. All right. Bottom line is, we go start making other cases. So at first I had been a case agent, which means you're running the case, you're not doing the undercover, but then I wanted to start doing the undercover. So the first undercover case I got, my job was to infiltrate an Italian social club, the mafia, okay, in Philadelphia. All right. I'm like, okay, what do I do? And my instructions were, go find S out. Go find, and it's not stuff. Go find stuff out. I'm like, what? Yeah, go find shit out. Okay. All right, I'm working undercover. I'm not going to ask, you know. So I go to these Italian social clubs, okay? No knock on anybody in here who's Italian. I locked up every nationality there was, so I'm not picking I really enjoy Italians. You'll hear that in a minute. I'm Irish. I don't look Irish, but I'm Irish, okay? This is the way I've dressed all my life. I dress quietly and hopefully neat, but, you know, nice. This is how I showed up at the Italian Social Club, with a Brooks Brothers shirt on. Now, everybody's in there wearing the Italian tracksuits. Remember those things? Okay, gold chains and Fila and all these. I'm not joking. I walk into the room, the whole place stops talking. Okay, and I'm like, okay. And I'm walking around waiting, and people would turn, no one would talk to me. Literally, not one person would talk to me. There's dice games, there's card games, there's all this stuff going on. I'd walk up to people, hey, and nothing. Okay, I'm working undercover. It doesn't matter. This went on for weeks and weeks. Nobody talked to me. It's my first undercover assignment. Back in those days, there was no training, none. Oh, you were a cop? Okay, you can go do this. All right? No training, nobody showing you what to do. I go there for about 2 or 3 weeks. And on the third week, I get in there one night, and all of a sudden I see this kind gentleman coming up to me. He was about 80 years old. I'm not exaggerating. About 80 years old, and he walked up and he put his arm around me. And I'm like, yes, finally. I'm going to get my first piece of information. And he goes, kid. Now I'm 35 years old at the time. Kid, I really like you. I really like you. But what the F are you doing in here? Okay? I might as well had FBI stamped right here. Okay? No clue what I was doing, absolutely. All right? But I loved it. I was hooked from that day. I'm like, here I am. And these were guys, that's why I tell the childhood stuff, these were guys that I had grown up type with. So now I get my second undercover assignment. All right? I flunked the first one. We can all agree on that. Okay, but this one was easy. They gave me a picture of a fugitive, a photo. And they said, we know he goes into this strip club on these nights, between these hours. All you got to do is go in there, see him, call us, and we'll come in and get him. How hard can that be? I got to look at a picture and find the guy. Okay? So because of my experience in my first one, I no longer had my Brooks Brothers shirt on. I still had on like khakis and, you know, maybe I had on like a pressed t-shirt or something, but I go into the most nefarious, disgusting strip club in America, in Camden, New Jersey, okay? This place is like Sodom and Gomorrah debauchery. There's literally drugs out in the open. There's people having sex out in the open, okay? There's drug deals going on. It's complete chaos. I go walking in there, okay? Got my picture, I'm gonna find my guy. So anyway, now that I'm experienced, I decide I'm gonna, I walk up to the bar, and right away I walk up and I'm like, give me a Diet Coke. This is all true. Give me a Diet Coke because FBI agents can't drink on duty, okay? And the bartender's like,
yeah, right.
okay. And you go, here's your Diet Coke, have fun. I sit by myself, so I'm either a mass murderer or a pedophile or something, okay? Music blaring, people running around. So I look at the picture, and now I have 2 or 3 more Diet Cokes, and I have to go to the men's room. Okay, go to the men's room. It was winter time, so I had a jacket on. I go to the men's room, I had put my jacket on my chair. I come out to get the picture in my jacket. No picture. Okay, gone. I didn't drop it. Okay, so somebody went into my jacket when I'm in the bathroom, pulled out the picture. I tell these 2 stories to young undercover agents who I train now, okay? To number 1, show them a couple things. One is I was literally the worst undercover agent in the history of the FBI when I started, okay? And 2, I laugh about that story, but think it through. I could have got seriously hurt or killed, okay? He was a murderer, okay? Now, I'm not saying he was the one, I never saw him. I'm not saying he was the one who went in and got that, but somebody went in there, saw his picture. I could have been in the jackpot, okay? But I'm not joking about this. They must have said, this guy is so bad, we're gonna leave him alone because he doesn't know what he's doing, all right? That was my entree into undercover work, okay? I later became very good at undercover work, and that's not a joke. I became very good at it because, number one, I became hooked on it immediately, and it's the type of thing that if you work hard at it, you can get better and better and better. And that's all I ever wanted to do, okay? In the FBI, the greatest compliment you can be paid as an agent is you make cases. It's very simple. You make cases. That means you lock people up. You do your job. So I spent the rest of my career making cases, all right? From that bad beginning, I started to get a little bit better, okay? Because how many mistakes can you make until you've made them all, and now you're not going to make the same mistake? And I didn't make the same mistake twice. I never carried a picture in my pocket anymore, okay? But now we're into the late 90s, and I'm still getting funny looks in Philadelphia. People still think there's something wrong with me. You know, it was just an awful period. So I decided to go to work an undercover case up in Boston. Okay, I'm originally from this area. Undercover work, sometimes you're able to go back to the area where you came from to work a case. So they said, you can work this Russian organized crime case. We think it's going to take about 6 weeks. I said, okay. I checked with my wife. She said, 6 weeks? Yeah, I can handle that, okay. 2 years later, seriously, so for the next 2 years, I lived by myself, away from my family, up here while she took care of my family, our family, in Philadelphia, okay. She eventually, I was given a transfer for them to come up and live with me, but it took 2 years, okay. But during that time, I worked a Russian organized crime case. That was my first, big undercover, okay. The Russian bad guy was literally a rocket scientist. That was his job, okay? I think by now you realize I am not a rocket scientist, all right? For entertainment, he would do mathematical crossword puzzles, okay? I couldn't help him with many of the questions, all right? But again, I got to start to learn this stuff, and we made a case against, he was also a money launderer. Okay, and this is what people always ask me, when you worked undercover, don't you feel bad when you arrest these people at the end? Not at all. Because they do one thing more than I do, and that's commit crime. Okay, so I've never felt bad about locking anybody up. All right, if they chose to live a honest life, I'd never see them. All right, everybody that I came in contact with commits crimes. All right, so I do the Russian case, and now I'm like, I don't like to use this word, but I tell people I was now addicted to undercover work. I had to do it all the time, okay? Addiction has a negative connotation. I don't like that word, but it was something, now I have to say challenge. I was challenged by it, but I was hooked on this stuff, okay? So right as one undercover was ending, I was already looking for my next one, okay? In the FBI, you have to take psychological tests to work undercover. There's 13,000 FBI agents. About 10% of them are certified to work undercover, all right? Only 10%. So 90% of your coworkers think you're a little bit goofy right off the bat, all right? So you get some funny looks, all right? We also have to take these psychological tests to get into one, while you're doing one, and when you finish one. And they didn't have this system when I first started doing this. So once they started this system, I would take these psychological tests, and of course I would cheat to try to answer the way I thought they wanted me to answer it, until they came to me and said, "Stop cheating." I swear to God, stop cheating and take this honestly one time, and then you can tell us if you believe it or not. So I did. I took the test honestly. It's 600 plus questions. It's like putting a mirror up to your face. Okay, so here's a little tale they told me. This is very important, okay? Psychologically, this is good and this is bad. Not any of you are bad, but for the purposes of this argument. You're all good people, you're all bad people. And there's the bright line between the two, okay? Most FBI agents test over here. They're all the way over here on the good guy side, okay? When my test came back, no lie, when my test came back, I tested right about here. Okay, just a little bit away from that side. You can't cheat and control this, okay? So for whatever reason, my psychological makeup put me one step away from this side. A federal prosecutor that I worked with said to me, "You are one chromosome away from the other side." Okay? Now think about that. That's either a tremendous insult or a tremendous compliment, right? Okay? Because if I'm a good guy, but I can be like real close to them, that's probably a good thing to be an undercover.
Yeah.
But that scared the hell out of me when they told me that, and when he said that to me. This was one of my best friends. He's a godfather of one of my children. You're one chromosome away from the other side. Okay? So I kept this line crystal clear and bright my whole career. But again, as long as I knew where I stood, I could deal with this side of the room in a way that I was able to make cases without ever going over that side. And the FBI also doesn't want you to know this. There's been agents who've crossed over to that side. Okay? Think about it. It's not normal to be somebody else. I got to convince real bad guys that I'm as bad or maybe worse than they are. Okay? Psychologically, that's not real easy to do. Okay? But ever since that first test and they told me that and they showed me where I stood, I really kept that front and center in my mind. Okay? Fast forward, I do the Russian case. That's successful. We make a money laundering case against them. Then my next case is my first mafia case. Okay? Many of you may not remember this, but before 9/11, before the Twin Towers got knocked down, the mafia was the biggest criminal priority in the FBI. Organized crime was the biggest priority. So now I'm going up to the major leagues. You're going to work undercover against the mob. The first case I work, it's in Boston. Some of you are going to remember this. Years ago, there was a shooting at the 99 restaurant in Charlestown. 4 guys got killed. Okay, I'm going up against the guys that were involved in that case. Okay, there's a guy named Bobby Luisi. Remember that name? It's going to come up later. Bobby Luisi is the head of the Boston faction, and he's dealing with the Philadelphia mob boss, a guy named Joey Molino. If you Google Joey Molino, he's Mr. Philadelphia, okay? My job is to get into the Luisi side. I told you I worked in Philadelphia before. I had helped arrest Molino on an armored car job years ago. I didn't do the investigation. I just went out on the day of the arrest to arrest him. But this is kind of distinctive. People remember my mustache. So we knew going in I couldn't meet Molino. Okay, but I'm dealing with everybody surrounding him, and he's the boss in Philadelphia. So I go work against Luisi and his crowd. Our job is to buy cocaine from them. We knew they were cocaine distributors, okay? But if I learned anything in undercover work, finally, you can't go in the first day and say, hey, you got some cocaine, all right? You got to build your way up. So I did stuff with them. I did stolen fur coats, stolen cigarettes, stolen film, crazy stuff. This is back in the 90s to make the case. And it finally leads up to the comfort level where I'm with these guys all day long, okay? This is a typical mob day. You wake up, if you're a mobster or you're an undercover agent pretending to be a mobster, you wake up, the first thing you think of is, how do I make money today? Not tomorrow. I don't even worry about tomorrow, let alone next week. How do I make money today? And then you go, you sit around in a room, and you guys talk about how you're going to make money, and then you go do it. All right? So this was my environment. I didn't go into the FBI office. I'd go to the mafia coffee house every day. Okay? And this is what I'm talking about, missing birthdays, and it's not like you can skip school. They tell you to be there, you got to be there. So I do this for a few months to the point that I'm comfortable talking to them about drugs and cocaine, and that's what we do. So I tell them basically, I supply suburban white people who don't like to come into the city with cocaine. So yeah, okay, we'll do it. So they sell me initially, they sold me 2 kilograms of cocaine. Okay? Everything's on video, everything's on audio, they're done, they're cooked. All right? Any federal prosecutors in this room? Good. Okay. Federal prosecutors will deny that we arrest people with a certain amount of drugs because it pushes the prison sentences up. Right? The truth is we do it all the time. Okay? They'll claim we don't, we do. Right? If you can buy over 5 kilograms of cocaine, they have to go to jail for at least 10 years. It's called a mandatory minimum, okay? So every dope deal I ever did, I wanted more than 5 kilograms, okay? That was my job, all right? We buy this first 2, and now we're gonna get, we wanna get at least 4 more to get over the magic number. So I start negotiating for more cocaine, and then it's Memorial Day weekend of 1999. My big boss, the SAC, a different one, he calls me up, he says, Mike, come in the office, we're pulling you out of the case. I'm like, what? He says, yeah, we're taking you off the case. And I'm like, we're almost done. We already got some, we're getting more. I said, what's up? Why you pull me? He says, we have reason to believe that they know you're an undercover agent. I said, how do you know that? He said, I can't tell you. And he was right, he couldn't tell me. But he says, we can't tell you. So myself and the case agent, the guy running the case, we argue strenuously, let us finish this case. We have 1 more month, we're gonna lock up the boss in Philadelphia, blah, blah, blah. I said, boss, I'll make you a deal. I won't go into any buildings with these guys. I'll just stay out in the street so people can watch me and nothing can happen if I'm out in the street. And he's like, nope, we're pulling you out. So we argue with him for hours, and he finally relents at the end. He says, okay, you can go back 1 or 2 more times, but you can't go inside any buildings. I said, okay, fair enough. All right. Anybody know the Cafe Vittoria on Hanover Street in the North End? Oh, yeah. Yep, okay. It has great coffee, but it's also a mob joint, okay? All right, just so you know, okay? So I go to the Cafe Vittoria, where I've gone dozens of times, and of course, the first day I go back, this is the first time I'm meeting them after my boss tries to pull me, and I come up to the front door. It's like a Wednesday, like at noontime, middle of the day. And I come up to the front door, Luis is inside the door waiting for me to come in. I said, Bobby, come here. And he's like, Mike, no, you come here. I'm like, no, come outside, come outside. And right away, it's awkward, it's weird. Now, I've been going in this place all the time, and I'm saying, come out. So then from the 2 ends of the street, I see 2 of his goons walking up, okay? Now these 2 goons, I know carry guns. I've seen them with guns. And I see one down there and one down there, and I'm like, I wish I had listened to my boss. All right, so the 2 goons come up, not threatening me, but just coming up. They're big boys. They're coming up to stand behind me, and I'm like, I got him in here, these guys behind me. I'm trying to get Bobby to come out, he's not coming. So finally I go, okay, I'll come in. And I literally go like this. I go like this. And I stop at the doorway, okay? Any undercover agent ever tell you he's not scared is a liar. My knees were literally knocking together. I'm not joking. These are bad guys. My knees are knocking together, but I was experienced enough at that point to know I had to talk my way out of it. I wasn't going to fight my way out of it. There's 2 guns behind me. He's a big boy. They're going to kill me if I jump him. All right? So I go in, and I finally said, okay, I'm going to go in against my boss's orders. I'm going to go in, and I'm going to talk my way out of this. I walk in, and the first thing Bobby says to me is, Mike, come down in the basement. All right, you had the same reaction that I did. All right? The one thing you don't want to hear when you go into a mob joint is, let's go in the basement. All right? So I'm like, damn it.
Cement truck out back.
Really? So what choice do I got? Okay? I'm not going to fight these guys. I'm not going to get out of there. Okay? And I'm still supposed to be undercover. Right? Now I'm thinking, do they know I'm an agent or not? Okay? Luisi takes me down in the basement. We start going downstairs. I tell people all the time, remember jukeboxes? This crowd will remember jukeboxes. Okay? There was a jukebox in the basement, and it was playing My Way by Frank Sinatra. Okay? This is all true. You can't make this up, but My Way by Frank Sinatra was the only song I ever heard my father sing in his life.
Oh, wow.
Okay? When my sister, my real sister, read this in the book, she started crying. Okay? Because it was the only song my father ever sang, literally. So as I'm walking down the stairway and My Way's playing, that was my father, who had been dead now for 25 years, talking to me from, I'd like to say above, but maybe below. Okay? But that was my dad telling me, you're getting out of here. Okay? That's a freaky, freaky story. It's a true story. But I got down there, and I was so caught up in the Sinatra song that I didn't realize Luisi had started talking to me about cocaine. So I'm like, well, if they're talking about cocaine, I guess they don't know I'm an agent, all right? And we end up finishing the deal, getting it done. I leave that day, they took me out a side door. I went out the side door and I vomited, okay? That's how afraid I was, okay? And I'm not shy, you know, I'm a big boy, I can handle myself, but I was so scared that day, I literally vomited when I left, okay? We end up making the case. We arrested Merlino in Philadelphia. To arrest a mob boss is a big deal. We arrested all these Boston guys that had been very violent guys, blah, blah, blah. Quick story, and then I'll get back on track. That's in 1999, okay? What's that? 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago. Luisi went to jail for 18 years. Bobby Luisi went to 18 years in federal prison on that case. My book came out last fall. My co-writer is Ralph Pizzullo. Bobby Luisi called up Ralph Pizzullo and said, hey, I'm the Bobby Luisi who's in your book. And Ralph says, okay. And he said, would you do me a favor? Can you send me a copy of the book and sign it? He says this to Ralph, and Ralph says, yeah, I'd be happy to. Would you like Mike to sign it? He goes, no, Mike would never sign that. He says, no, I'll ask him. I think he would. So he calls me up, Ralph calls me up, he says, I got Luisi asking for, he said, will you sign it? I said, sure, send it to me. I wrote in it, Bobby, no hard feelings. All right? But he had served his time, 18 years, and I wish him well. You know, I hope he stays out of trouble. All right? So that's my first mafia case. We're going to speed it up a little bit. That's 1999. About 6 months later, I get asked to do a case down in Rhode Island. Anybody here of the Patriarca family? Right. Yeah. They've been mobsters for 50 years. It started with Raymond Sr., Raymond Jr., and a handful of people since then. I go down to work a case in Rhode Island against a guy named Matty Guglielmetti. If you Google him, you'll find out he's a captain in the Patriarca family. Okay? We wanted to make a case against Guglielmetti before he was positioning himself to become the boss. So he was in prison, he was coming out of prison, and we decided to make a case against him as soon as he got out of prison before he could become the boss. So we had to be smart. As dumb as Luisi was, Guglielmetti was very smart. Okay, I had a lot of respect for him. Very smart mobster. But he has an Achilles heel that they all do. He wants to make money. Okay? So I worked that case down in Rhode Island. I started working it in March 2000. Okay? We arrest Guglielmetti January of 2005. Okay, 5 years later. So for 5 years, I had to go to work every day in Rhode Island with Matty Guglielmetti as my partner and make the case. Okay? Working undercover for 5 years is insane. Think about being somebody else for 5 years, okay? During that case I was working against Guglielmetti, we occasionally get what's called quick hits. They're murder for hire. Somebody wants to kill somebody, and we insert an agent into that process to avoid somebody getting killed. So during the Guglielmetti case, I got called to do a murder for hire on a different group far away from Rhode Island. And I'm thinking about who I'm going to be and this and that, and it was easy. I became Matty Guglielmetti. Seriously, I dressed like him, I talked like, I've been with this guy for 5 years, I could mimic him to the T. So here I am taking somebody that I worked against and using it in a murder for hire that we arrested somebody before somebody got hurt. Getting back to Guglielmetti, he was a very, very sharp mobster. He eventually agreed to guard cocaine for us. The mafia would protect cocaine as they thought we were transporting into Canada. So on the night of the last load, I'm in a hotel room with Matty, and he knows if they protect his cocaine, the next day he's going to get paid $67,000 in cash. He was going to get $1,000 for each kilo. There was 67 kilos. So the next day he comes to my office. This is after 5 years. He comes to my office and he says, you know, I'm here to get paid, basically. And I said, okay. In reality, I had about $10 on me. Two agents come in to arrest him. And he turns and he sees one of them that he recognizes as an FBI agent. And he turns to me. And when he turned to me, the look of panic on his face was indescribable. I had been his partner for 3 years, and he never figured it out. You know the induction ceremony in Medford, Massachusetts in 1989 where the FBI recorded the mafia making an actual ceremony? He was part of that group. This guy's a serious mobster. But for 3 years, he never figured it out, okay? I'm gonna wrap this up in 2 minutes. That's the second mafia case. The third mafia case they talk about, you probably recognize this name, the Cheese Man, Carmen D'Annunzio from the North End. Okay, Carmen was a character. Carmen was about 400 plus, okay? That was a very easy assignment for me because what my orders were was to piss him off, to make him angry at you so he'll threaten you, okay? So I meet him up at the hilltop up in Route 1, and I have to make believe I don't know who he is. Now, he's trying to sell $6 million worth of toxic loom to the Greenway project in downtown Boston. So I become a Massachusetts state dirt inspector. Okay? I didn't know, but there's a lot to know about dirt. I swear to God. I had to go study dirt from the dirt people. Okay? The day we go to the dirt farm where this toxic loom is, everybody any watch Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer?
Yeah.
Remember that show? That is the best, should be mandatory training for every undercover agent. Because how Cesar Millan learns to control dogs without them realizing it is exactly what you do with bad guys. All right? So I did my Cesar Millan stuff where I drive in, you know those state lime green trucks you always see on the highway not working when we're stuck in traffic? Okay? That's where I got in. I get in one of those. I drive in the dirt farm. I'm whipping around in the dirt, going crazy. I got on a yellow construction hat, an orange vest, driving around. I finally pull up. They're waiting for me. I finally pull up, and I go to the bathroom intentionally on the wheel of the truck right in front of them, and then I shake hands with them without washing my hands. Okay? And people laugh, but that's a Cesar Millan trick. I'm telling them, you're not even worth me washing my hands. Okay? One of his partners was a guy named, I think his first name was Larry. I intentionally called him Lenny. Okay? Again, these are little psychological tricks you can use, but hey, Lenny. No, I'm Larry. Okay, 5 minutes later, hey, Lenny. And they're just getting mad at you, which is what we wanted to. Bottom line is we make a dirt case against Carmen D'Annunzio, but it's a federal crime. Okay? He goes to jail for 6 years for selling toxic loom. All right? Do the 3 mob cases, fast forward. The last big case, you've heard of El Chapo, the Sinaloa cartel. We did a case in Boston. This is very few people know this. The Boston division of the FBI is the only FBI division ever to make a case against the Sinaloa cartel, and we made it out of New Hampshire. Okay? We dealt with his front level. You can read about it. We dealt with his executive board. He was a fugitive. He was hiding in the mountains in Mexico at the time. I exchanged handwritten notes with him, telephone calls with him, but we never met in person. He was a fugitive. He was the world's most wanted fugitive. Okay? But we made a case against them, and he recently went to trial in New York and was convicted and is now in the Supermax. Okay? That was my Super Bowl. Remember how bad I was? At the end, I went up against Chapo Guzman and made a case. Okay? I was very proud of that. Okay? That was I say I'm like Gronk. That's the one I wanted to go out on. Right? You are a winner. Okay? One more story and we're done. That case ends in 2014. I'm scheduled to retire less than a year later. Okay? 2 days after we lock up Guzman, I'm the undercover coordinator in Boston. I handle all the undercover stuff. One squad comes to me, say, we want to work a counterterrorism case against subject A. Okay? A different squad comes to me 2 weeks later. We want to work another case again. We want to work a different case against the same guy. They're targeting the same guy, but they don't know it. Okay? And they shouldn't know it. You're not supposed to know what somebody else is doing. Guy's name is Joe Burke. Okay? Joe Burke is supposedly, he's a Charlestown bank robber. He's supposedly the premise of the movie The Town. That's supposed to be based loosely on his life. Okay, Burke's in prison, 16 armored car robberies. He's arrested while he's in prison for selling drugs, and now he's getting out, and we have him on the phone already threatening to kill somebody. Okay, so my instructions to my office, I'm not retiring. I literally packing my boxes. I say, put your best people on this. This guy's a nut. Be careful. 2 days later, I'm walking with my wife and my dog, like we do every night. My phone rings. Okay, it's one of my bosses. You feel like climbing in the ring one last time. Okay? Now remember my wife, who I don't tell anything to? She can hear this part of the conversation, and she's like, don't you dare. She's mad. And she says, you just did Chapo. It ain't going to get any better. Now you're going to go get this nut. Okay? My answer was, I can't help myself. This is that addiction I'm talking to you about. It's a challenge that I can't pass. I go back and take the case. He gets out of jail in January. They want to work a counterterrorism and a drug case. Both of those cases would take at least a year. 2 months out of prison, he says to me, hey, you know a lot of rich people. I said, yeah. He goes, well, rather than them getting a divorce, I'll do this. I'm like, Joe, you can't keep like going back to prison. You've got to stay out of trouble. No, I don't have any money. I need to do something to make money. I'll do this. And you're like having a conversation like you're ordering at Burger King with a guy talking about killing people. And he's dead serious. He's one of these guys. I tell people, I never got within arm's reach of him. I wasn't going to let him literally grab me because he's a nut, okay? But I say to my office, we can't make a long-term case. We got to get him off the street. This is that guy who stands behind your daughter in the grocery store that you don't recognize, or standing next to you at the airport, right? He should not be out in free society. He's a danger to every one of you, okay? So I come up with a solution. What do we do with this guy? How do we get him back in jail? What do you offer to do for me?
Kill.
Okay, guess what? Hey, Joe, I got a problem. I need you to help me with something. I got this guy who's caused me all kinds of financial problems in my business. I need him to go away. You want me to kill him? Yeah. Okay. And this is like a normal conversation for me. This is what I mean. You go home and have coffee with your wife, and you know what you do today. I hired some guy to kill somebody. We can't have them kill one of you. Okay, you understand that. We can't put the general public in harm's way. So who's he going to kill? You got an FBI undercover agent hiring him to kill another FBI undercover agent. Okay, I bring in a friend of mine. I say, piss him off. He makes him go crazy. We set it up. We go to New York. He buys 2 weapons, 2 guns. He has us order a mask from Hollywood that makes you appear to be a black person, like a realistic Hollywood mask, okay? Like he's done this before. He knew which store we had to go to, all right? So we set this up, and we'll end it at this. We're gonna kill this guy at 1 o'clock in the morning, okay? We set this up that he comes out of his business at 1 o'clock, blah, blah, blah. I said, Joe, we got to kill a couple of hours. This is down in New York. Joe, we got to kill a couple of hours. What do you want to do? He goes, let's go to the movies. I said, what do you want to go see? It's midnight. We'll go see Black Mass. Black Mass is the Whitey Bulger movie.
Yeah.
So I'm now at midnight in a movie theater in New York with popcorn, and Joe Burke is sitting next to me. Joe Burke worked with Bulger's group, and he's telling me what parts of the movies are right and wrong. Oh no, he didn't kill him, and this was him. And, okay, tape recorder's running. We arrest him when he literally goes to kill the guy in the building, okay? And he's taken off the street, and he's never going to see the light of day, okay? The reason I end with that is that's my last hurrah, even though the Chapo Guzman was the highlight. I'm never going to be able to do this again, and I just wish I could, okay? I've never lost the urge, the bug, the addiction, whatever you want to call it. It's all in this tomb that I wrote for my children. Like I said, you're going to hear people talk about making a TV show, making a movie. That's meaningless to me. I hope you understand that. And I'm not being ungrateful. I'm very happy that's paying off the rest of college. But that's not my life. This was my life. Right? Thank you very much. Thank you.